Welcome, everyone. I'm Dr. Randy Brinson, Chairman of the Christian Coalition of Alabama, and I have the distinct honor and pleasure of speaking today with Barry Moore, who's our congressman from the 1st District, and he is also a candidate for U.S. Senate. And we're so proud of him representing the 1st District and seeking this office at U.S. Senate. So, Barry, welcome to our podcast. Welcome to our Christian Coalition audience, and look forward to hearing from you today. And thank you for taking time to be with us.
Yeah, Randy, thank you for having me on. It's good to see you, my friend, and it's always an honor to be on with you.
Well, thank you so much. Barry, let's just talk about, there's been all this distraction, but let's really talk about the issues that really, as a United States Senator candidate, needs to address. You've had a long track record in Congress, and we were looking over all the people that have endorsed you. Talk to the audience a little about your endorsers and why you think they endorse you in this particular race.
Well, I think you're right. Randy, I've been in D.C. for 5.5 years, and there's always rhetoric in politics, and there's records, and so we've been pretty good about running on our record. I'm a member of the House Freedom Caucus, as you know. There's only about 40 of us in Washington, D.C., and I think because of a conservative voting record, you don't just get to join the House Freedom Caucus. They look at how you vote, and then you're invited to join. And so being in that, obviously, that conservative leaning unit within Washington, D.C., I think that's about the only place I go, Randy, that I feel like I don't need a shower when I leave. They're really great Americans. They're patriots. And so, but I think over time, if you just look at my voting record, I've got one of the highest liberty scores in the nation. I recently got 100, with the Heritage Action, and there were only 11 in the nation out of 435 members of Congress that scored a 100. So as you run on your record and people see that, then the endorsements start to follow, right? I mean, whether it's Turning Point USA, I mean, down the line, we got, obviously, the president endorsed us because we've been in the fight with him, and he sees us vote and hold the line. J.D. Vance, Susan B. Anthony, the NRA, all those groups came on board based on our voting record. And so I think there are so many endorsements from conservative groups around the country. It's hard for me to hit on all of them. But the ones that you recognize, the ones that that are leaders in that world and third-party evaluations of your voting record, we've gotten all the key conservative group endorsements.
Well, that's wonderful. If you move from Congress, you're fortunate enough to get the nomination and obviously the Republican nomination, and hopefully win in November. How will the U.S. Senate be different than when you're serving in Congress? What do you see the difference, the pros and the cons, and how you think some of the ideas that you want to bring to the Senate that you would like to see passed in legislation, for example?
Well, I think obviously in the Senate, there's fewer of you. And so you have more legislative power, the deliberative body, they call it, but you really can move the needle. Coach told me when I decided or thought about it or agreed to do it, I don't remember exactly where I was in the process, but he said you can truly make a difference in the U.S. Senate because with 435 House members, obviously there's give and take and there's a lot going on. But in the Senate, you can truly impact policy. And for me, the policy is codifying the president's executive orders. I mean, we got the Save America Act sitting there in the U.S. Senate. That's something that's polling 78% among Democrats and 86% among Republicans. And it just simply says that you need to have an ID, you need to be a U.S. citizen to voting in U.S. elections. And, the left accused Trump of the Russian collusion, crossfire hurricane, Christopher Steele dossier is, it's foreign interference in elections. But literally, there's nothing more foreign and interfering in election than non-citizens voting in elections for U.S. leaders. And so we've got this Save America Act. I just introduced a bill a few weeks ago, Americans First immigration policy, that has 5 of President Trump's executive orders just on immigration that are within that bill. Those are the kind of things that we've got to accomplish. President Trump came back to D.C. with 350 executive orders. I mean, the American people sent him there. He won the popular vote. He won all the swing states to accomplish his agenda. And so if we're listening to the American people, then the president's agenda should be our agenda and vice versa. And so we're working together with the president. But I think the key is we have to codify, we have to put in law the stuff that the president wants to do, because if we don't, the next president, and I don't know if we'll be Republican or Democrat the next 8 years, hopefully we'll be Republican for a long time, but they would literally with a pen and a phone, you see them go in the office day one and start signing these executive orders. They can undo everything that President Trump has done if we don't put it into law. And that process of codifying it is a slow process. It's a deliberative process, but it's a process we need to follow to protect those policies for future executive branches from the administration change and what President Trump's trying to do.
Absolutely, and that's what that's the thing I share with a lot of conservative groups, Barry, is that we say, oh, the president signed these executive orders, and they think that's great. Well, that is great temporarily, but if you don't codify that in law, just like you said, the next administration, whoever that be, could just do away with everything, and so all that stuff has just gone to the wayside. So I can't thank you enough for at least making that agenda. Can we talk about immigration for a second? We've made some great strides with immigration, and here in Alabama, we still got one of the big issues is in our school systems. We have all these immigrants that came in from the Obama administration, and they're settled in Alabama. They're kind of working the dark economy, and what happens is they're coming into our school system, for example. All right. And they're taking up space. And what happens is it's affecting instruction. And yet, we're hearing on the one side that the federal law requires you to enroll these kids, under federal law, right? But there's also this incentive to keep these kids in schools because you get more money based on the per pupil funding. How do we deal with that? How do we get Alabama kids time to be instruction, or is there anything we can do at the federal level to help the states in this whole problem with overcrowded with immigrants that can't speak English, for example?
Yeah, there's 57 different dialects of Spanish south of the border, and what happens is you have these kids come in from all these different countries, and then we literally have to have a teacher's aide almost for each individual student within the classrooms, and then that does slow the progression of learning within the classroom settings because the teacher is not focused on the 20 other kids in the room. They're having to slow down, and we've got this aide trying to help this one student. And one of the things in the Americans First Immigration Act that I was just talking about that I've introduced as one of the executive orders is that we're going to do away with these not anchor babies, but this chain migration, where if you come to the U.S. and you're here, you can't bring 25 family members. Basically, it's a dependent child and the spouse. That's it. That sometimes those sort of things, if we get them into policy, will limit just kids and family members that just keep coming. And so that's one of the things. And I think cleaning up the mess that was made. I mean, under Biden, the border was wide open. We've talked about it. We saw it. We've had the hearings. I've been to the border 3 different times. And the Disney Fast Pass program, I call it, on the southern border was basically you come across the border, you apply for asylum. Instead of in Mexico, remaining in Mexico, they would let them come here. And then they would get a court date. It may be 7 years down the road, and we give them a cell phone, government programs. And so I think President Trump, what he's doing by locking down the border and getting people out of here, that's going to take some of the pressure off the system. But it kind of reminds me, if you got a water leak, say in your house, you got a water leak, the first thing you do is shut the pressure off at the road. So we have shut the pressure off at the road by doing away with all these government programs. We're building the border wall. That's basically repairing it at the wall out there, repairing the leak at the road. And then you got to go in and clean up the mess. So we've stopped the pressure. We're building the wall. And now we're going to go in and clean up the mess. And sure, there's going to be pushback on that. But I think Mark Wayne Mullen at DHS is doing a good job. And as we get these people out of here, hopefully those school systems can really start focusing on American kids, the students that are here, their parents are paying into the system, public education, private education, whatever that looks like. And one other thing I've done too in this package of bills, American First Immigration, is I'm requiring these universities, you got to charge these kids that are here illegally, because literally a kid from Alabama that goes across the state line in Georgia or vice versa, they have to pay out of state tuition. But we were giving kids coming here from foreign countries preferential treatment over kids coming from out of state. And so those are the kind of things we've got to codify to make sure that we can truly, truly protect our education system. And we as taxpayers subsidize these universities. We fund these public schools. And yet foreign kids, people coming here have never paid into the system, are taking advantage of that. Not are they getting an advantage by getting in the system free, they're also penalizing our kids by slowing the process, limiting the ability to be accepted into these universities. But even so, with those aides in those classrooms, they are truly, truly slowing down the learning process for our kids.
Right, exactly. And to your point, Barry, I also seen at even the professor level. So there was people like, say, Tuskegee, I'll just give an example. They were getting these J-1 visas for these college professors. They were here for 3 years. Then they go get tenure over at Auburn, and they're here forever. Yeah. So that's one thing. And the second thing about the chain migration, that's why you have Dearborn, Michigan. You would not have a Dearborn, Michigan that's taken over by someone that totally has not melted into American culture. They've got their own culture, taken over an entire American city. That's because of chain migration. That wouldn't have happened otherwise. So we're seeing exactly what you're saying. We're seeing that now. So that's a huge problem.
I think too, Randy, if you look at the arrest of the fraud leaders, that we're starting to arrest some of those people that were stealing millions of dollars from the taxpayers. And in addition to that, cutting that money off, I think you'll see some of that start to dry up on its own because again, when we shut the money off at the border, the people stop coming here for the handouts, and so that thing has slowed. Matter of fact, we've got a net negative migration. We've moved more people out of this country than we brought in, and by the Constitution, we're not required to allow people to come to this country. One of the things, and I keep hitting on this, but I'm pretty proud of this doggone bill, is one of the things that the American First Immigration Act, we actually look instead of a diversity lottery. Instead of just saying, yeah, we're going to diversify, we actually look at the people who want to come to this country in the immigration process and say, what's your education level? Can you contribute to our economy? And two, we want to make sure they're willing to assimilate because that does not save our culture. It does not protect our culture. When we import the third world and we don't actually ask them to join in our belief system, the fabric of this nation, we begin to undermine the very fabric that built this nation. And that's why you're seeing such a divide in the country. Some of these communities are starting to elect some of these leaders who don't believe in this country. They don't love our flag. They don't believe in what we believe in. They have no plan to assimilate. It was simply an invasion. It's not immigration.
What would be wrong? Let me ask you a question. Or could this be done at the basic school system? Why couldn't you require birth certificates and citizenship, or at least have that, at least keep data on that of kids that are enrolling in our public school systems, for example, in Alabama? Is that possible?
I don't know why it wouldn't be. That may be at a state level thing. There might be some federal requirements. I wouldn't hate it at the federal level, to be honest with you, to know who's here and who's enrolling. But certainly at the state level, some of our, and the problem too, and you know how this is. I mean, in politics nowadays, if you're conservative, you're labeled and you're called all kind of stuff. And the problem, a lot of the politicians don't have the courage because they're worried about what people are going to call them or going to say to them. But that at the state level and the federal level, those are the kind of things we got to speak the truth to. We got to be willing to be courageous, even in the accusations and the attacks, to make sure that we move those sort of things across the finish line. But I wouldn't hate that idea. I don't know, like if you do that at the state level first, or if we look at it at the federal level, because right now, I'm trying to do away with the Department of Education in Washington, D.C. I've introduced that bill. And McMahon, she's working on it too. Linda McMahon said, how do we put this money and leave it in the states for them to educate their kids? Because the Department of Education doesn't educate anybody in D.C. Basically, you send your tax money to D.C., then a bunch of bureaucrats attach a bunch of ideologies and policies to it, and then they send you part of your money back minus what they charged you to tell you what to teach in your classrooms, and you get less money in the classrooms, less money to invest in our children, and you got this big bureaucrat telling you the only way you're going to get this money is if you abide by the rules that we tell you. Most of those people in DC are leftists, so I'm like, we don't need the Department of Education. That money really needs to stay in the states. And there are things we're doing to try to do that. And like I said, doing away with the Department of Education is one of the things. I've already been on that bill. I'm leading the way on that too, because we need to leave that money in the states and then let the states make the decisions on how they spend their money.
Absolutely. I think that's right on target. I want to pivot healthcare for a little bit, Barry. President Trump has been very adamant about getting rid of Obamacare, and the Conservatives, the Freedom Caucus has been very adamant about that. But then there's parts of the Republican Party apparently they're kind of dragging their feet on that, and I guess it's because certain people benefit from the system the way it is. And as a result of Obamacare, I don't know if you're aware of this or not, but that's one of the reasons what's driving healthcare costs. So if you look at, for example, our hospitals around here, they're basically bringing in J-1 visas. They're hiring doctors, and they're paying them at a higher rate because Obamacare allows them to pay them a higher rate. So I'll give you an example. So here I was competing with doctors being paid 3 times what I did because they were owned by the hospital. And the reason I'm doing that, because under Obamacare, if you went to them and had an endoscopy done, you would get charged Blue Cross $2,300. My fee would be $300. So it's led to this tremendous healthcare inflation. And in the case of Jackson Hospital, you've heard a lot about what's going on with Jackson Hospital. We found so far, I heard today, 2 things interesting. You may not be aware of this. $985 million they can't account for during the reign of Joe Riley, the last administrator. Okay, that's number one. Number 2, the Regions Bank just found an account with $2 million sitting there that nobody knew. And it was under the name of Ben Wells, who was the chief financial officer. $2 million that they didn't know anything about, right? And then number 3, the previous administrator that was there before they went bankrupt, Joe Riley, had been at 3 other hospitals. And our good friend Ken Paxton, who's now, thank God for him in Texas. His Medicaid fraud unit was so good, he found that hospital where Joe Riley was administrator was charging Texas Medicaid 10 times what it should have been. And then he turned that information over to the feds. That hospital's fined, and they were paid a $157 million fine. But what big deal. So Joe Riley just jumps over to Jackson. So 3 hospitals at, 3 all were found guilty of fraud, and 1 went bankrupt, 2 were fined a hefty fine. So with that in mind, and all the stuff, corruption we're seeing now, like you said, with the Somalis and those people up in Minnesota, with all the, the COVID money and everything, how in the world do we get our hands wrapped around this? And why can't we change this back to a more system that's more like the private pay instead of moving towards a one payer system like Obamacare wants us to do?
Yeah, and they call it the Affordable Care Act. It's neither affordable or caring. It really was an insurance program, Randy. I don't even think it was really healthcare. It's not been about healthcare. And so the president is right. He thinks that the people ought to have some free market choices and they ought to be able to make those decisions. And it certainly needs to be repealed. I mean, what was frustrating to me? We had a lot of Republicans run on repealing Obamacare. And now it's like you can't. And this was back even during the McCain days and some of those guys. I mean, I'll never forget John McCain walking down there
Right, right.
and moving down. And I was like, you have to be kidding me. They had said so many times they're going to repeal Obamacare, repeal it. When they had the opportunity, they didn't do it. But you're right. That system really was about a lot of corruption, a lot of fraud, and certainly the insurance companies have made a ton of money. But you literally, if you reach out to some of these insurance companies, you got somebody sitting behind a desk without any medical training, denying treatments that people need,
Right.
that the doctors have told them they need. And so this person here is trying to protect the bottom line of the healthcare and the insurance companies, and the patients out here with the doctor-patient relationship being told, no, we're not going to approve that. And so there has to be a revamping of this system. It's just unaffordable. And I think the president gets it. Most of us get it. How we get there, I don't know. But we've gotten some stuff over to the Senate. We're trying to fix that through the House. Again, that's one of the things that the Senate needs to move on. We've got sitting over there right now.
Well, to your point, exactly about the insurance companies. So this past session, you may be aware that the state allowed this exemption for Blue Cross Blue Shield to move up to $6 billion of their reserves. So they have this big reserve fund. That's your premiums, my premiums, everybody's premium. And you're federal Blue Cross, I am too. But let's say the rest of the people in Alabama that have Blue Cross, that's their premium. That's not Blue Cross's money. They make money when they make claims and process a claim. So they move that money into a nonprofit company, but can buy for-profit businesses. And when I questioned Blue Cross on this, Barry, they said, "Oh, we want to be more consolidating." I said, "Wait a second. That's more Obamacare. So you want to buy more things, so you become more. You might as well be a one-payer system. They want to buy other things. They're making plenty of money." And so now, and they just were fined $4.2 billion in federal lawsuit where they were denying claims, as you mentioned, just like that, and not paying providers what they should. So now they had that claim of $2.6 billion. Now they just moved all the reserves to this to make more money, and none of that money was required to go back to reduce premiums. Something's got to get fixed, Barry, on this. I mean, this is ridiculous. States are doing this because they're getting pressure from Blue Cross, they're getting donation from Blue Cross to make legislation to strengthen the insurance companies in against the patient and the people that are actually writing the premiums. So
Yeah.
we got to do something about it? We really do.
Yeah, and I think too, free markets, right? I mean, I think that we ought to be able to compete across state lines for policies and ought to be able to
Absolutely.
customize plans because, now you like if Heather and I are beyond childbearing, we've got grandbabies, but we still have to pay for maternity. I'm like, why can't we customize plans for patients and have there's a high risk pool for pre-existing. We need to be looking at how do we fund that, but then the rest of these people, these young folks, and it's the first time in my recent history. I'm old enough to remember when you got fined for not buying health insurance under Obamacare, right? I mean, it's like literally they're forcing you to buy something and you're getting fined if you don't buy it. If it's good, the free market will do it. You'll buy it for yourself if it makes sense. But they literally had to fine you for not buying it. So they have young people in the pool to pay for these pre-existing and older people. But I think the premiums are to adjust based on the risk, and there ought to be a high risk pool over here. Maybe the government subsidizes just that area. But man, it needs to be free market. You need to be able to customize your plans, and there needs to be options across state lines. We shouldn't have these monopolies, these one state monopolies, and these insurance companies, like I said, that are tied closely to the politicians to control policy on health care. It's like the old saying, the fox guard in the hen house, if you really think about it.
Exactly. I don't know you're aware of this, Barry. You were the first politician I've interviewed that has brought up the idea of a high risk pool, just like we do with the wind pool. We have the wind pool where insurance companies pay into a thing so people can have affordable insurance down to the coast, right? You can do the same. You're the first one that's ever talked about this. You need to do the same thing with healthcare, because why should someone 30 years old that has 2 kids subsidize people that do bad behavior and are really sick? And then if you create the high risk pool, you can incentivize them. Okay, you don't have to be in a high risk pool if you do X, Y, Z. If you quit smoking, quit drinking, work on your diet, things like that. People that are changeable things in their lifestyle that can contribute to their healthcare costs. So kudos to you for talking about that, Barry. No one else has talked about that I've ever heard anywhere on any of the politicians I've talked to.
Yeah,
So
and actually let people take responsibility for their health. I mean, it's like
correct.
if you're willing to do that high risk behavior, it's going to cost you more to insure that high risk behavior. But like I said, this young family out here with two kids are just getting by. They shouldn't be subsidizing your parties and weekends and hanging out and doing all the crazy stuff you want to do. That shouldn't be on this family out here trying to make a living and provide for their family. So yeah, brother, things like that we've got to look at.
Okay, let's talk pivot a little bit to the life issues a little bit. One of the questions right now, and there's a little bit of rub with the Trump administration on the drug misoprostol. Attorney General, I think DeMarshall has talked about people bringing misoprostol across state lines to families and girls here and women in Alabama. Do you have a position on that, Barry? Or are y'all had any thoughts about how to address that with the FDA?
Yeah, we're trying to restrict it across state lines. Obviously, we're pro-life state, and we don't like that stuff being shipped in here. And so, that's unfortunate because of the rulings we had at the Supreme Court. We thought in many ways that would probably lower the number of abortions we're seeing, but now these abortion pills are being shipped across the state lines, and I've actually introduced a bill. It's called the Introduces Label Act to hold abortion drug dispensers accountable. So we've got that in legislation. We've introduced that in DC. So we're going to try to help along with what the Attorney General's doing in the red states around the country to limit that stuff being mailed across the state lines and these abortion pills being administered to these young girls.
Yeah. And also the other thing that's come up, at least during this election at the state level, but it also has national implication is IVF. IVF is a great tool. It's a way to bring create families that people have been, are infertile for whatever reason. It's a great tool, but we don't want it to be abused. It's for sex selection or allow gays to, impregnate people, things like that. And what gets me, I just came back from Europe, okay, and there's a lot of elections going on in Italy that we're working some. They've had laws that limit how certain things, guardrails around IVF in Europe, and it doesn't affect IVF for access or anything like that for
Right.
years. Why can't we do that in the United States? What's been the problem with doing that at the federal level with IVF and putting these guardrails around that so that's not being abused? So, for example, they don't take embryos and use it for fetal tissue research or something else horrible.
Yeah, and you're right. I mean, it's a wonderful tool for families who want to have children. But I'm with you, and I haven't seen the European model, but in many ways, I kind of agree with you. I think we need to make sure that it's that family's child that they're getting, and it's not some, like you said, we don't have trans couples or things like that going out or researching with these babies or these embryos to use them for some sort of research that would not align with our Christian values. And so I don't know. I haven't seen that model. You and I need to talk more about that because that might be some legislation we can look at our federal level that allows families, because it is a wonderful tool to be able to have children. But at the same time, we don't want to get outside the parameters of what we think as Christians and we believe in should be the policies around that.
Right. Well, that's great. That's great. And then finally, Barry, again, I appreciate so much your time for speaking with us, Barry. I really do appreciate this. And I think it's very helpful for our viewers. We've been very active this last year on AI. AI, that's been in the news. AI is a great tool. It's kind of like IVF. It's a great technology. I mean, people use Chat GPT for all kinds of things, for helping them speed up their work, editing, there's all kinds of things they use it for. But it also is really a problem. So, for example, like Roblox is one. Roblox was a tech company that was having games for kids. You think of very innocent. Well, it became able for predators to get in there and pedophiles to get in there to threaten kids and seduce kids through that. We've had AI programs that tell kids how to create, if you want an abortion, how to get an abortion. These algorithms do that. And one of the most egregious ones we've been looking at is Grok. Grok is the AI program for X. Grok is telling young kids how to create pornographic images of girls they go to school with. So your daughter or granddaughter, Barry, could have a picture. You could have an instant picture on Facebook, and someone could take that picture and turn it into pornographic and spread that around. And those women's lives are ruined. And what we're kind of puzzled by is why have been people so slow to act on this illegally? For example, in the UK and in France, they've gone and raided Gronk headquarters and confiscated these servers with thousands and thousands of pornographic images on there. But you see very little action, at least at the level of the country. And one of the things that worries us too is at the presidential level, they've taught the AI people are trying to gaslight President Trump and saying, "Oh, these are fine. We don't want any restrictions." But they every time the feds try to do something, they're the ones, their lobbyists is putting a monkey wrench in everything. So how do you thread that needle? Not do away with AI, but get to these logarithms, just the logarithms that are excuse me, the algorithms that are causing these problems and creating these problems for kids and families.
Yeah, so Josh Hawley introduced, and we introduced a bill. It's called the Stop CSAM Act, and it actually allows transparency. It's going to strengthen the transparency and protect children suffering abuse on and mistreatment online. And so I'm the sponsor lead in the House. Hawley's the sponsor in the Senate. So we're starting to introduce legislation. And again, Randy, I think it's a matter of educating, right? I mean, because as technology moves so fast, the members, we're having to learn about it. And like you said, we're dealing with a lot of issues. It's like drinking from a fire hose, but we're certainly going to strengthen the restitution. It's going to strengthen the restitution for victims. It's going to improve a tip line for cyber, so we can actually have a tip line that allows people to report these issues. And then there'll be some accountability for those groups, like if it's Google or whatever that is doing that. And so we think it's a good bill. It's pretty complex, but it certainly is going to provide the starting guardrails for what you're talking about to allow us to actually hold these companies accountable.
Yeah. So can I ask you a little bit more detail that? Is there anything that what about going after just those algorithms that specifically tell kids, for example, on Grok, spicy Grok, they're telling kids, why don't you take their clothes off? And then they hit a button and it takes their clothes off. They're prompting them. It's not like they're just doing it on their own. They're prompting. Why couldn't we get something that says, if you don't take this particular algorithm down, then you could be held liable for injury to these kids. I guess that's one thing I was asking.
Yeah, as you were asking, I actually had pulled it up here. It says it's going to hold culpable platforms accountable. This bill creates new criminal and civil accountability providers that are intentionally, knowingly, and recklessly making available or promoting or facilitating CSAM, which is the child, whatever it is.
Yeah, right.
It's going to actually provide damages, liquidated damages, attorney fees, cost, punitive damages, and injunctive relief for those
That's
families.
wonderful.
So,
That's wonderful. Well,
yeah,
if you
it's
get
there.
that,
I just had to get it and pull up because it's got so many sections in it. I'm like,
yeah.
wait, pull up. So as you were asking, we scrolled through and found it. But yeah, that's a pretty good bill. You're welcome. Give me the number off of that, Davis, and you can share it with your folks or y'all can look at it. It's HR 3921. I'm the sponsor in the House, and
Holly's the sponsor in the Senate.
Yeah. Katie Britt's on board. Actually, we got a bunch of co-sponsors, but Holly's the lead in the Senate, and I'm the lead in the House. And so if you want to look it up, man, that'll give you more of the details. It's a pretty good bill, we think.
Yeah, have Alex or someone text that to me. That would be wonderful. Okay. And if whenever y'all get that up, their hearings, let me know, because I would like to speak on our experience on that here in Alabama with children and families here. That would be fantastic. Barry, anything else that you can share with our viewers that would be helpful as we contemplate prayerfully about this election on Tuesday and voting? What can you share with us?
Yeah, BarryMooreForAlabama.com, Randy, really lays out what we've done in D.C. We're proud of our record, and we've got a great relationship. Obviously, the president's endorsed us, and so we'll be ready to go day one. One thing that people don't think about, I've been in D.C. 5.5 years, but that transports as seniority over to the Senate. So for Alabama, being on those committees and getting seniority, preferential treatment, at least you get the seniority assignment when you're applying for committees. That's going to be big for our state, so we can backfill where the coach is. But check our record, man. We're so proud of our record.
Can you explain that a little deeper, Barry? Because a lot of people don't understand that about the seniority issue. Because they would probably think that you're just going in as a junior senator, right?
Right. That's the thing. You actually get time in the House goes towards preferential treatment on the committees. And so I will be one of the more senior House members because Harriet Hageman's been in, she came in, I think she's been in DC 4 years. Julia Letlow's coming from Louisiana. She's running. She's been in DC maybe 4 years. But I've been there 5.5 years. It'll be 6 years into this term. So the only person that will have more seniority going into the Senate from the House will be Kevin Hearn from Oklahoma. He's going to come in for Mark Wayne Mullen. But we're actually, for Alabama, it's vitally important because those committees, SASC, Ag, Veterans, all those things, if you got a little bit more seniority, you can get preferential treatment. You get a priority treatment on assigning for committees, and that's big for the state of Alabama, big for what we want to do for the state.
Well, that's real important. I mean, just look at Mike Rogers. He's the chairman of the Senate Armed Services Committee. We've got Robert Adderholt, senior head of the Appropriations Committee, and Katie has a senior position with the Appropriations Committee and Armed Services. So that gives Alabama a lot of clout, as you say.
It really does, and it's vitally important when you're negotiating these deals. The higher ranking you are on that committee, the better you're going to be for the state of Alabama.
Right. Well, Barry, again, thank you for taking time. I know you've been very busy. You've been very gracious in giving us time to talk with you. And I hope this is helpful. Hopefully, get this information out to our viewers. And like I said, everybody remember to vote Tuesday, June 16th, in the Republican runoff. It's very, very important that your vote counts. So, Barry, thanks again for your time. I appreciate it very much.
Thank you, Randy.